What's up everybody, Paul here. Got a quick tip for you. If you're in Japan, I know a lot of my friends like the green tea when they're out and about, but before you go and order this green tea here, I got another hint for you. Go to the supermarket instead and buy this green tea powder or matcha powder even. It's fresh, it smells wonderful, and you can make the best fresh green tea right there and then on the spot. All you gotta do is buy the most cheap water you can find, 500 yen. Let's do it. Ooh. Now once you've got your water, take it out, take a sip, make some room, brain freeze. Now take a little of this green tea powder or matcha powder, whatever you've got. Try to get just a little bit in here because really a little bit goes a long way. So shake it up, and voila, you've got tasty fresh green tea. That's good. Highly recommended. Much better than the green tea that's been sitting in those bottles for a long time. Just get the water, get some powder, do yourself a favor, stay healthy. Now, what I really wanted to talk about today with you all is who had the biggest ninja network here in Japan. Now, when you think of ninja networks, you think of the big three generals of the warring state periods, right? There's three generals that really stand out. One, of course, is Oda Nobunaga, and then underneath him was his second in command, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and then also we have Ieyasu Tokugawa. These are three main generals, right? They all had distinct personalities, distinct ways of doing things. For example, there's an expression here in Japan that says, if the little bird doesn't chirp, Oda Nobunaga kills him. For Hideyoshi, if the little bird doesn't chirp, he'll make it chirp, because he was very clever, very skillful with his mind. He makes different types of plans and strategies to make his opponents do certain things. So he'll make that bird sing. And the third one is Ieyasu Tokugawa, who eventually was able to unite the country with his patience, is that if the little bird doesn't sing, I'll wait for it to sing, however long it takes. But there were lots of different daimyo, leaders, powerful men in the Warring States period. We can't forget Takeda Shingen, who was very famous for his ninja. We also had Uesugi Kenshin. We also had the Sanada clan, and all these different leaders, you can go look them up in history books. They all had ninja networks, but who had the biggest ninja network in the history of Japan? But before we get to that answer, I wanted to give a shout out to my friend Ben Cole, who sent me a copy of his great book, Understand Good Play. You might remember this book. Its first edition was sold out quite rapidly, and it was sold for thousands of dollars on different auction sites around the world. You couldn't get yourself a copy of it, but Ben has since put out a second edition, and this edition is supposedly even better than the first edition because it's been tweaked by Sensei. There's some new pictures in it, there's some new commentary in it, so I'm really excited to go back and read this book. This book is like sort of like a time capsule for me. You know, I read it, I look at some of the quotes, and it just throws me back like, you know, a time machine to that time period when we were training with Hatsumi Sensei back then. It's a great book. Even if you haven't trained with Hatsumi Sensei, you can get a lot of insight out of this book. And I'm really looking forward to have Ben on a podcast with us here at Kusumian in the near future to explain all about the new things with this book and also his adventures and his time and his experience with Hatsumi Sensei. It should be a really good time. I look forward to that. Also, I want to give a shout out to my friend Igor from Macedonia, who produced this book with one of his students. It's a manga book about Takamatsu Sensei. Basically, it's one story. It's about the fight with Cho Shiryu. Now, it's just got the one story about that time, that match. You've probably read it in other books. You've heard about the time when Takamatsu had the dream of the butterfly. It's that story. But if you want to see it in manga form and maybe brush up on some kanji, because there are some kanji in the book like this, it could be a fun little book to read, and it's always good to support our Budo friend. And I'm also super excited about my summer 4-in-1 tripod that I just received from New Bear in fall. There's always next year, right? You know, it floats upside down, upright, it does all these kind of cool things. So, next year, let's hang out. Okay, let's get back to it. So, who had the largest ninja network in Japan? The answer might surprise you. Masaaki Hatsumi Sensei. Was this a trick question? Maybe. But if you think about it, at the peak of the Bujinkan, Hatsumi Sensei had around maybe 300,000 students around the world, globally. Hatsumi Sensei had many students in all different types of positions around the world. Some of them were in some of the highly secretive government services like the CIA, M6, FBI, DEA, immigration services. There were doctors, there were lawyers, there were so many different people from all around the world, from almost every major country in the world. Now, how did he do that? How did one man create a global network of over 300,000 people. Did he beat them into submission? Well, sometimes it felt like that. But I would argue that Sensei was actually a very generous, caring, kind, loving person, and he truly cared for his students. And that's why I wanted to bring back this article that we started discussing last week. This is possibly the first article that he was ever published in any magazine in Japan. If you haven't seen it, I'll put a card up here. In the latter half of this article, he speaks of things about training your body and what you should study and practice and things like this. But also, what I think is very important, he talks about the training of the heart, which has to be done simultaneously in conjunction with the training of the body and the physical prowess. This can really give you a lot of insight into Sensei's teachings. For example, of course, a ninja must train himself in the art of perseverance, but also he must train himself to not be an arrogant person. It says we must actually train ourselves to rinse away this arrogance and this idea of being a braggart. So even if you were the most amazing martial artist in the world, you shouldn't brag about it. In fact, you really don't have to let anybody even know about it unless it comes up in natural conversation. In other words, a ninja must train to not be a dick, to not be an asshole. Or as the Australians say, well, the Australians have their own level of swear words, so we'll stay away from that. A shout out to all my Australian friends down under. So Sensei wrote in his first article he ever published that a ninja is someone who should not be hated. Fair enough. I mean, how are you going to stay alive if everybody hates you? Who's going to make an alliance with you? Nobody. Makes sense, right? So a ninja, in a nutshell, should be someone who's likable. And like I said before, Sensei was a very likable person. You know, Sensei always made you laugh. He made you feel very comfortable. You always had a good time around Sensei. You know, I often tell my students, just don't be a dick and your ninjutsu will improve vastly. It'll be the best thing you can do for your ninjutsu. Maybe I should put that on a t-shirt so everyone can see it. You know, some of my Norwegian friends always made great t-shirts. Think about that for your next t-shirt. Let me tell you a story. In high school, I was a tennis player. I wasn't that good, I admit it. I probably lost the majority of my matches. But I didn't lose them because my opponent was so great, was some sort of tennis genius or prodigy. I lost because I kept making mistakes. Literally, all my opponent had to do was keep that ball coming over the net, and, you know, I beat myself. You know what I mean. Literally, I lost my matches because I kept making mistakes. I would shoot balls out of bounds, over the fences, throw my racket. You know, I mean, they just had to stay in the game. And that's what I'm saying here. Just don't be a d***. Keep the ball in play. Be friendly. Respond to people. Be cheerful. You know how you've felt awkward and shy and nervous about meeting people? Well, other people feel that same way too. So as a ninja, we should train ourselves not only in the physical aspects, but also in these social aspects and on the heart. So important. This is really the only reason, well, I shouldn't say only reason, but I think one of the main reasons or the main ways that you can really create a good community and increase your network. And I'm not saying you increase a network for your own personal gain, reputation, or fame. No, a network is something that supports life, supports everybody in that network. You know, this reminds me of that saying, 縁を大切にする. Sometimes that's translated as cherish your connections, but connections seems to me to have a very superficial feeling. This should be more like cherish your bonds, cherish your coincidental meetings, cherish every point of contact you have with anybody in the world. And Hatsumi Sensei was a genius at this. Every time he met someone, it could be anywhere, he fostered that relationship. It's like a small spark in like some wood, and you have to care for it and foster it and make it grow. Boom, it turns into a big fire, right? And this cherishing the connections is very important. Doesn't say use your connections, make a transaction with your connections. No, it says cherish them. And I think that's so. I think, you know, every time Sensei met a person, it didn't matter whatever level of society he was from, you know, it's as if that person were a part of the divine coming down to meet you. And I think if we have that type of mindset, it really helps us when we think about cherishing those connections and our meetings with people in general every day. Now, another way you can think about this in reverse is kind of a picture from Steve Olsen's book, Heaven, of Hatsumi Sensei's artwork. Here it is, and you see there's 4 guys and they're killing a spider. Now you see, a lot of them are just cutting the thread. They're cutting the web around the spider because, as we all know, a spider needs its web to survive, right? To eat and to live. And it's the same way with ninja. They need their web, they need their network to live. And if you cut them out of that, if you cut their connections to their network, then they end up dying. So you see how important it is to have a network to stay alive. Not just you, of course, but also the other person as well. Everybody thrives together, which is so important because there's such an emphasis on, me and mine and I. So it's always important to remember that the whole network is rising up with you. And in fact, I should say it the other way around. When the others rise, you rise with them. All right, just a couple more points here. Also in the article, Sensei points out that a ninja should take a little time every day to find a quiet place and reflect upon their day, to go back and think about how their day went, what they did good, what they did bad, and how they can improve themselves. And remember, this is not a competition. You don't have to compare yourself to somebody else. You just have to be a better version of yourself than you were yesterday. You just have to be a little better than you were the day before. So a ninja must take a little time every day to reflect, sort of like a meditation. And this teaching was consistent with everything Sensei told me. Even up until the day he retired, he would often tell me, Paul, a dojo is not only a place where we learn the killing techniques and the fighting techniques, but a place where you come for reflection and oftentimes repentance and forgiveness. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is what Sensei mentions about the symbol for nin. As you all know, the symbol for nin is the sword or a blade above the heart. There's many stories about why it's like that, but in the article, Sensei mentions that it's because the heart is the one thing that receives the blade. You receive the blade with the heart. Now, I'm not going to go into that, but boy, I tell you what, that just gives me shivers, right? And I think it's really true. And I think, the network is so important to everyone to stay alive. We are so connected on this earth. And once you can understand that, everything seems to fall into place anyways. But if you're having trouble figuring out how we're all connected all over the world, just remember your network and remember that saying, cherish your connections, which is to really cherish those meetings, the relationships, the bonds between people, foster them, make them grow, make them bloom, and just have a good life, have good communities, have good friends, and enjoy yourself and your training. Anyways, this could just be the ramblings of a madman at the Kasumian in Japan. But if you liked the video, if you got something out of it, go ahead and like it, subscribe, turn on notifications, come back and see us again. Until then, see you next time.